The deserter desperately dug through the snow on the ground, then buried his head in it, crying loudly while praying not to be discovered. But no matter how earnestly he prayed, he was ultimately escorted by military police, along with another deserter, onto a truck headed for a military court. Facing severe punishment, he sat helplessly and bleakly in the military truck, listening to the mockery and ridicule from several military police officers. He fell into deep silence. Losey thought there was no escape this time, yet in the very next moment, the truck accidentally drove into a minefield.
Girl's dead.
Because they were now inside a minefield, everyone obediently stayed where they were, afraid to move even an inch. Lying on the ground, Losey seemed to see a glimmer of hope for escape once again, but unexpectedly, the sharp-eyed military police captain drew his pistol first and warned him not to harbor foolish thoughts. Left with no choice, Losey obediently continued lying on the ground, completely motionless. Immediately after, the captain ordered his only remaining subordinate to probe an escape route using a shovel. Although the subordinate was filled with reluctance, orders were absolute, so he tightly gripped the shovel and slowly began searching for landmines. At that moment, the other deserter mustered his courage and suddenly stood up. Ignoring the captain's warnings, he looked around in all directions, searching for a possible escape route. But with the captain constantly aiming a gun at him, he could only pretend to comply and nod obediently. Not far away, the military policeman holding the shovel soon discovered a landmine, but in the next second, panic caused him to accidentally trigger it, and he was blown apart beyond recognition. Witnessing this brutal scene, Losey, who already despised war, felt even more tortured inside. What he never expected was that the captain then ordered him to replace the policeman who had just been blown up and continue searching for mines. Terrified of death, he frantically shook his head, refusing to move no matter what. But under the captain's repeated threats, he had no choice but to obediently crawl toward the shovel. Fortunately, he eventually managed to grab the shovel, just as he was about to start searching for mines with it. The other deserter seized the moment when the captain was distracted and bolted away. The captain hurriedly turned to shoot the deserter, but accidentally shifted his left foot and triggered a landmine. Losey immediately seized the opportunity and successfully escaped the minefield by following the deserter's route. What he never expected was that the deserter suddenly ran back along the same path and reached the captain's body. He then swapped his own dog tags with the captain's, and finally picked up the captain's pistol and smashed the captain's face beyond recognition. The deserter did this only to create the illusion that he himself had been blown to death. Losey and the deserter then once again began their long journey of escape together. To avoid being captured again, they ran with all their strength. Only when they were gasping for air and completely exhausted did they stop to discuss their next route. After some discussion, they decided to flee westward. They planned to reach the western coast first, then find a way to stow away on a ship and return home. They traveled through the frozen wilderness for an entire day like this, yet the forest ahead still showed no sign of an end. In the end, starving and freezing, Losey collapsed to the ground, and in his daze he once again saw the wife he missed day and night. Just as he was immersed in the dream of reuniting with his wife, his companion forcefully pulled him up. Encouraged by his companion, Losey gathered his strength and lifted his feet once more to continue westward. When night fell, they unexpectedly encountered a pair of German soldiers in the forest. Fortunately, the darkness was so deep that the German soldiers did not notice them. They lay in the snow and endured a freezing, agonizing night. At the break of dawn the next day, the two set off again. They finally emerged from the forest and arrived at a field of devastated ruins. In order to find food, they searched desperately through the ruins, but there was nothing here except endless wreckage. Not until midday did they unexpectedly come across several fallen soldiers. After 2 days of hunger, they finally found some food on the bodies of the dead soldiers. That evening, they passed by a church, and the utterly exhausted pair decided to rest there for the night. But just as they lit a fire, a man with a terrifying face suddenly lunged straight at them and pinned one of them firmly to the ground. Seeing this, Losey quickly grabbed his gun and tried to stop the man, but the man seemed completely unhinged, showing no sign of stopping at all. Fortunately, after a fierce struggle, his battle-hardened companion managed to subdue the crazed man. After days on the run, they tried to ask the man where they were, but the man was clearly mentally unstable, his speech broken and incoherent. After questioning him for a long time, Losey and his companion gained no useful information at all. To prevent the man from going mad again and attacking them, they directly tied him up with a rope. The man said nothing, only letting out continuous wails of sorrow. Early the next morning, as dawn began to break, Losey and his companion released the man, left the church, and continued fleeing west. What they never expected was that the mentally unstable man followed closely behind them, lingering like a shadow that would not leave. After realizing that the man seemed to have no ill intent, they eventually accepted him. 2 deserters and 1 mentally unstable man thus formed a small wandering group of 3 and continued westward. With the companionship and comfort of Losey and the other deserter, the man's mental state gradually improved, and he even began to play the harmonica for them. In that moment, they forgot the cruelty of war, forgot the madness of killing, and forgot the memories too painful to recall. They were immersed in the beautiful melody, enjoying a simple kind of happiness, until one night several days later, when they passed through a forest filled with the hanging bodies of civilians. The horrific scene caused the man, who had only just begun to recover, to lose his sanity once again. He stared at the bodies hanging from the trees with terror on his face, remaining silent, and as Losey looked at the bride hanging from a large tree, he once again thought of his wife, whom he missed day and night thousands of miles away. Fortunately, his alert companion once again pulled him back to reality in time. When he came to his senses, he discovered that the mentally unstable man had already hanged himself from a tree not far away. Although Losey did not know what the man had experienced in the past, the man's madness and eventual suicide left Losey so heavy-hearted that he could barely breathe. At that moment, he seemed to feel the unspeakable torment and despair hidden deep within the man's heart. In the early morning of the next day, they were suddenly awakened by a sound. They hurriedly got up and saw a horse grazing on wild grass not far away. The 2 looked around cautiously, slowly approached the horse, then seized the opportunity and grabbed the reins. Immediately after, they joyfully mounted the horse and galloped away. At that moment, they laughed like 2 children who had just received a new toy. It was as if the cruel war and hopeless killing outside no longer had anything to do with them. They no longer seemed like deserters, but like 2 ordinary men simply trying to return to their distant hometown. With the help of the horse, their escape became much faster, and they rode hard until evening, when they spotted a building. After fleeing for an entire day, they decided to rest there for the night, to prevent encountering another attacker like the mentally unstable man before. They carefully searched the entire building this time. Only after confirming that no one else was around did they finally relax their guard. That night, Losey was once again tormented by nightmares. He dreamed that during a battle, he used a flamethrower to burn his own wife and daughter to death with his own hands. Overwhelmed by grief and guilt, he once again jolted awake from the nightmare. In truth, this was not a dream, but Losey's real experience. Earlier, during a battle, he had mistakenly killed a mother and daughter hiding in a corner, which made him, who already hated war, despise it even more. This was the key reason for his inner unrest, his inability to face himself, and his ultimate choice to become a deserter. Awakened from the nightmare and unable to fall back asleep, Losey walked alone to the window. He hoped the quiet night might calm his restless heart, but instead he unexpectedly saw a girl in white dancing gracefully downstairs. The eerie sight made him, who had just awakened from a nightmare, feel even more panicked. In his alarm, he quickly turned around and woke his still sleeping companion, but when they returned to the window, the girl had already vanished, because Losey had seen hallucinations more than once before. Seeing his wife and daughter, his companion did not take it seriously and assumed Losey had once again fallen into fantasy out of longing for his daughter. After his companion left, Losey continued to watch from the window for a long time, but never saw the girl again, until early the next morning, when the 2 prepared to set out and continue fleeing west. They suddenly saw an armed couple approaching them quickly. When the couple noticed the horse tied downstairs, they immediately became alert. Seeing this, the companion quickly pulled Losey into hiding, and they concealed themselves on opposite sides of the stairway on the 2nd floor, then launched a sudden attack as the couple appeared. In this way, they successfully captured the couple. The husband and wife hurriedly explained that they were ordinary civilians who had lived there all along. They said they had gone out hunting the day before and had only just returned that morning, and insisted that they meant no harm. Kind-hearted Losey chose to believe their words, but his companion believed they were lying. As he spoke, the companion used interrogation as an excuse and began to harass the woman. Seeing this, Losey hurriedly tried to stop him, but the companion suddenly pointed a gun at him and ordered him to shut up. In order to protect the woman, Losey tried to grab the companion's gun, but was struck unconscious by a blow from the gun stock. Just as the companion, who had been suppressing himself for a long time, was about to continue attacking the woman, he suddenly heard the sound of rifles being cocked all around. In the next moment, Multiple gun barrels extended from the corners surrounding them. Left with no choice, the companion obediently put down his weapon and became the woman's prisoner. The furious woman immediately cursed him and slapped him repeatedly across the face. When Losey opened his eyes again, he found that he and his companion had both been tied up, and the ones guarding them were a group of children with an average age of less than 10, many of whom were disabled. No one knew how much time passed before the couple appeared in front of them again, but this time their positions had completely reversed. It turned out the couple believed they were German spies disguised as Allied soldiers, so they interrogated them about their secret mission. Losey and his companion repeatedly explained that they were genuine Allied soldiers, not German spies, but their explanations were answered only with one loud slap after another. In order to gain the couple's trust, a helpless Losey finally admitted that he was a deserter. As soon as he said this, the children could not help but burst into laughter. To confirm whether Losey was truly a deserter, the man asked many questions about the Allied homeland. Faced with Losey's fluent answers, the couple finally began to reluctantly believe him. Even so, because Losey's companion had earlier harassed the man's wife, the man did not immediately release them. They were imprisoned like this for several more days, and Losey once again saw the girl in white who had danced downstairs days before. The girl wore a mask and rarely spoke, and as she listened to the beautiful melody from a little boy's music box, she began to dance gracefully again. Looking at Losey's fair and smooth face, she gazed at him with envy for a long time, then silently stood up and left. Time passed second by second amid the children's laughter and Losey's inner torment, until one evening, two boys on watch ran downstairs in panic and whispered something to the couple. The couple hurried to the window and saw a large number of German soldiers approaching rapidly with guns in hand. The man, who had always resisted the German forces, knew that he would not escape his fate today. He quickly went to the two deserters he had imprisoned for days and finally revealed his own story. It turned out that he and his wife had originally been teachers at a school for disabled children, because most of these disabled children were orphans abandoned by their parents and had no families. When the war broke out, he and his wife fled into the forest with several of them. In order to survive, he trained the children to use guns and taught them how to fight. Most of the time, they survived by hunting, but they often attacked isolated German soldiers to obtain weapons, ammunition, or food. To avoid German pursuit, they frequently changed hiding places, and they had only arrived here half a month earlier. They never expected that the Germans would find them so quickly. So at this moment, facing the overwhelming advance of German troops, the male teacher knew the situation was extremely unfavorable. He begged Losey and his companion, saying, "You are deserters. You know how to escape. I hope you can take the children and get away. My wife and I will stay behind to hold off the Germans." Hearing his words, the faces of the mother and daughter that Losey had mistakenly killed appeared before his eyes once again. The wrongful killing of that mother and daughter had always been a burden of guilt that Losey could never overcome, and it was also the main reason he became a deserter. At this moment, he believed this was a chance given by fate to redeem himself, so he agreed without hesitation. He even swore that he would do everything in his power to get the children to safety. After Losey's repeated persuasion, his companion finally agreed to help protect the children during the escape. But at this very moment, German soldiers had already surrounded the entire building, leaving them no way out. Just as they were discussing how to escape, the Germans began launching their attack. With no other choice, they split up with the children and hid separately, searching for suitable ambush positions. Then they chambered their weapons, preparing to fight the Germans to the very end. Before long, a small German squad cautiously entered the building. Just as the Germans spread out to search inside, the group seized the opportunity and opened fire decisively. In just a few minutes, they completely wiped out the German squad through the sudden ambush. Watching the small squad vanish in an instant, the German officer was furious. However, he did not order his soldiers to continue the assault, instead choosing to hold their positions and wait for the right moment. Only when night fell did the German tanks finally rotate their cannons and unleash a fierce bombardment on the building. At the same time, several soldiers took advantage of the shelling and quickly threw smoke grenades into the building. The thick smoke caused everyone to cough uncontrollably, making it impossible to remain hidden in ambush. The German forces seized the opportunity and stormed into the building again, launching a deadly attack. After a brutal battle, the group once again repelled the German assault through sheer determination, but two children lost their lives in the fight. The male teacher held the bodies of the fallen children, his heart filled with grief and rage. In order to buy everyone a chance to survive, he charged out without hesitation, determined to destroy the German tank. He galloped forward while constantly throwing grenades at the enemy. Faced with this sudden charge toward death, the German soldiers were thrown into chaos and scrambled to respond. Inside the building, the others continued firing at the Germans to provide cover for the teacher, but in the end, the teacher was struck by enemy fire not far from the tank. To be absolutely sure, the Germans mercilessly fired at his body once more. Just as the Germans believed the deadly charge was over, no one expected that the horse that had just galloped past was still carrying the boy whose legs had once been crushed by a tank. Taking advantage of the distraction, he quietly slipped off the horse and quickly hid in the grass. Under the cover of darkness and tall grass, he rapidly approached the German tank. The moment he reached it, he threw the explosive without hesitation. Although he successfully destroyed the tank, he did not escape alive and was ultimately shot by the German soldiers. The enraged German officer no longer hesitated and ordered a full-scale assault on the building. Large numbers of German troops surged forward like a tidal wave, and the decisive battle officially began. The two sides fought fiercely for a long time, and although many German soldiers were killed, the children fell one by one in the battle. The female teacher was also killed by German gunfire while protecting a little girl. Fortunately, because the German forces suffered heavy losses, they eventually abandoned the assault and withdrew once again. Looking at these children who should have been innocent and carefree, now reduced to cold, lifeless bodies, Losey felt so suffocated by grief that he could barely breathe. The severely wounded companion looked at the three children who remained, and after a long moment of thought, decided to sacrifice himself to give Losey and the children a chance to live.
Get the kids out of here, you go too. Go out of the stream, follow it to the woods, you'll make it.
What about you?
I finally figured it. After 33 years, who I am.
Clutching his weapon tightly, he roared and unleashed fierce gunfire at the Germans, then leaped out of the window to draw as much attention as possible. With his companion's desperate cover, Losey successfully led the three children out through a rear window, but during the escape, he was unfortunately struck by a bullet. Enduring the pain, he brought the three children to a safe place, leaning against a large tree and sitting beside a campfire. He looked at the three children and revealed a look of peaceful relief. Since joining the army, this was the first time he had ever felt so light, so at ease. At the final moment of his life, he finally understood the true meaning of fighting. The essence of battle is not about killing, but about protecting the most primal kindness deep within our hearts. In his days, he once again saw his wife. He slipped back into a beautiful illusion, but this time, no one would ever wake him up again. He would remain forever sweetly happy within that dream. I am a film enthusiast. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.